In with Stephen Carr, and today we have a very special host, not ghost, host, Nicole CLevland of the podcast Conservative and Chic. You can find her on LinkedIn. That's where I found her, and we kind of connected, and she agreed to come on. So today we are going to be talking about foreign policy, as as we have suggested for the topic for today. So we go with. So why don't you start us off with what you want with the country that you want to talk about here first?
Well, the country that everybody is talking about is hitting the news, like going viral on social media, is the purchase of Greenland. And I want to talk a little bit about why it's so important for us to have a presence in Greenland. The quickest way for Russia to penetrate our military defense in Europe is to stream from the Arctic to the North Atlantic. And then since 1995, we have seen the largest military buildup from Russia since the ending of the Cold War. And as we see, they're getting closer and closer to Kriegen. And if you don't know what Kriegen is a nuclear base in the Highlands in Scotland. And it's the only place that the UK has nuclear weaponry, but it's also the only place that we, as the US, are allowed to dock our nuclear submarines. And as we know, going into modern history a little bit, we have seen over the last decade or so the increase of wanting an increase for Scotland to free themselves from Europe, or not Europe, but from the UK. And as we see that, we also see the fact that if Scotland were to go independent, where they were to free themselves from the UK and the European Union and to free themselves from there, what would happen to Kriegen? Well, Kriegen is very unpopular among Scotland. And the reason for that is Scotland hates nuclear weaponry, but they also hate UK and England overreach. And so if Scotland were to have independence, if that vote would have gone a different way and independence would have been successful, then they would have shut down that naval base. And that would have indicated us to be able to be removed from being able to dock our military weaponry there. So that would be the only presence we would have to be able to have nuclear submarines. So when you do that, you have that loss of the Arctic. And so with Greenland, it's so important to us to get Greenland to have that presence in the Arctic, because we also lost 2006, sorry. In 2006, Iceland, we left our military presence in Iceland. And by doing that, we have seen dramatic increase of the Russian presence in that area, whether it's military buildup, whether it's economic-wise, but we see that happening over and over again in that area. But also, when we pulled out our military out of Europe, our combat military out of Europe, we still have a presence in Europe, but as far as combat, we removed our military aspect from there as well. So when that happened, Russia annexed Crimea. So if we were to remove ourselves from that equation and that base would close, we would have no way of stopping Russia from penetrating us in the northeast. I mean, by the time they got into the Atlantic Ocean, they could be as far as New York before we would actually be able to really stop them. I mean, they could go 3 weeks and probably really not have a strong presence, showing that they have a strong presence. So that is also an issue. So when we look at that, we got to look at how that it impacts our American First agenda. So, and it's kind of complex, so it's maybe a little bit, in the weeds here, but for us to have American First, we need to be able to secure, Europe to be able to secure our allies. And so purchasing Greenland or coming to some kind of an agreement with Greenland would be in our national interest, as I explained earlier. But also it would be in NATO's best interest, which is why I think we're seeing that agreement. As I came down here into my studio like 15 minutes ago, it was on the news that we have come to an agreement with Greenland. So or some kind of a framework of an agreement. What that is, that will come to pass. We don't know yet. But I think it's important for NATO to realize that if we don't have that presence, then NATO isn't as protected. I mean, if you don't have U.S. and NATO will cease to exist. We know that. And even though they're paying now 5% or 3% or whatever these countries agreed upon, they're not paying their fair share. And so we are paying we're paying for most of this security. So if it's our best interest, it's also in NATO's best interest to agree with us on that as well. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Not to mention that we also need Greenland for their minerals and lithium,
Exactly.
the power sources over in the U.S. So if we can secure that, and they'll hopefully offer us their minerals and their lithium for our America First agenda for power. So
I agree, because if we can't get the minerals, the more and more we're still going to be dependent on China for their lithium and their resources. And the more we can differentiate ourselves from China, which is also in our natural interest as well. And then,
right. Yeah, and that's really big for the Mega America First agenda is the whole AI and power source, and the pulling away from China and Iran with tariffs, and just relying on America, because that's what America First is. Being able to rely on our own power sources or our own manufacturing and nuclear sources. So
absolutely. And that is truly American first. We saw the aspect of how we are so dependent on China during COVID, and we can't put ourselves in that situation ever again. So we needed to come to not only national security, but an economic reach of different, leaving ourselves, getting close, leaving ourselves out of China as much as we can. Is our security, but economic security as well.
yeah, because I remember when Biden was in office, and we gave a lot of our power sources in the military away, and we were very low on military. We couldn't even defend ourselves, and now we kind of have the military back up with Trump in office. One of the biggest department heads, Pete Hegseth, in office, and now we just need to refuel with the lithium and power sources, and pulling away from China's power source and metals, and making our own steel, and using that to be number one again.
Yep, absolutely. And we've seen the largest recruitment in, I would say, probably in modern history. We are smashing our recruitment numbers over and over and over again each quarter. And we're seeing, at least in my area, I live in Northwest Iowa. So if you know what Northwest Iowa is, it's pretty much the reddest of the red in the nation. It's very conservative, but we're seeing that pride that we have for America, our state, our country. We're seeing that across. We've always had that, but we're seeing that across the country now. Maybe not in Minneapolis right now, but we're seeing the pride in our country more so than ever before. And I think with this increase of our economy is going to skyrocket in the first term. They're talking about a 5.6% increase in GDP, which would be astronomical. But we're also seeing recruitment and infrastructure recruitment in our military. We're seeing the stars of the American First agenda, and I think that's really going to come into play over the first quarter to at least by the 2026 election, we'll see it in full force.
Yeah, when Biden was in, the people I talked to were pulling out because they didn't want to be under him. And then when Trump was elected in 2024, they were like, "Oh, I'm going back in." And especially now that we have Hickseth at the helm of the wheel, I mean, instead of the transgender Levine who completely destroyed the military with DEI and wokeness,
Right.
now people actually want to fight.
Exactly.
So
They want to do what's best for our country. They don't want to deal with the primary issues that are facing our nation. And DEI is not one of those primary issues. Whether the Democrats say that or not, it's not one of our primary issues facing our country. We have so much more that is going on in our country and the world to focus on other than DEI. So I think it's important that we change that culture. And Pete Hudspeth has done such a great job as the helm of the Department of War now, which I think is really cool that they changed that as well. But I think we're seeing that culture change, and I think that's going to
yeah.
trickle down into, and we've seen that trickle down into recruitment as well.
I also love how we are going back to what the founding fathers called the departments, the Department of War,
Mm-hmm.
instead of what was it, Department of
Department of Defense, yeah.
Department of Defense,
Mm-hmm.
Department of War, and Trump's bringing back the Monroe Doctrine,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
which we'll get to shortly with Venezuela. So,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're going back to what America should be and what the founders wanted. So
Exactly.
it's awesome.
Yep, exactly. And that America First agenda, a lot of people were concerned about what exactly does that mean. We're seeing that across our, in our, you talked about the Monroe document. We're seeing that in our hemisphere. And the US has always been, a force in the Western Hemisphere. We're saying we want to control the Western Hemisphere, which is basically what the Monroe Doctrine is, which is why, in a lot of aspects, we did go into Venezuela. But also, it was a human rights issue as well. Those people were starving. Those people were basically in prison in a lot of ways, if you look at it in that way. And that wasn't getting covered on the news. We weren't seeing the atrocities that were happening under the Maduro regime. And we've seen, the fixed elections. We're seeing the crime. We're seeing cocaine being rushed through. But also, if you look at Venezuela, Venezuela is the largest distributor of oil and gold and minerals in the world combined. I mean, anywhere in
Wow.
the world. And so when you look at that, you look at why that would be important for the US because being Venezuela was very friendly with Russia, very friendly with China. And if China and Russia were able to get control of Venezuela, which in a lot of ways it was getting closer and closer to doing that, we were seeing the atrocities, but also seeing how poor. I mean, a lot of people are talking about it as a crisis in Venezuela. Well, if you're at a world aspect, you see it as a failed nation state. You see that happening. You saw that happen in Iraq. You've seen it happen in Syria. You see it happen in Yemen. And when you see a failed state, it's easy for other forces to get involved. And the more and more Venezuela and Maduro regime was getting dependent on Russia and China, where they were distributing their oil, the more and more control they had on that country. And of course, we can't have that happen and get control of that because if they get control of the Western Hemisphere, Venezuela is 30 minutes aspect, really 30 minutes from having placed nuclear or having nuclear, not nuclear weapons, but having being able to them Russia or China to be able to have nuclear weapons in that region, which is in 30 minutes aspect of could hit the US within 30 minutes. So you look at that, that's an aspect of it. And why it's so important for us to have that not control of Venezuela, but in a lot of ways we do now. Basically, Trump said we're going to run Venezuela until they're able to run themselves. And it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to be, I would say, probably years before. I would say 2 years, probably, give or take, that we'll be able to have free and fair elections in Venezuela. But I think the more and more we're there, the more the Venezuelan people welcome us in and be able to help, the more we're going to see um, that control go back to the Venezuelan people. And the more we're going to see that have a domino effect in, say, Cuba. And if we can, and I
I
think
think we did the
that will
exact same
happen as
thing
well.
in Afghanistan, didn't we?
What was that? I'm sorry.
Didn't we do that same thing? Didn't we do that same exact thing in Afghanistan? I think it was, or was it Iran, where we bombed them, and then our military and our like government kind of took over until they ran an election, and then they ran somebody to become president.
In more successful ways than others, Afghanistan, unfortunately, under the Biden administration, we pulled out too soon and caused chaos in Afghanistan, and we've seen that happen. I think Iraq, we've seen that happen as well, but it was a little bit more controlled. They do have free and fair elections in Iraq. We've seen the thumbprint, which I don't know if people remember that, but shortly after, like the first election, to me, it was so moving because women weren't allowed to vote in Afghanistan. Women weren't allowed to vote in Iraq. They weren't even allowed to really attend political rallies. They weren't allowed to speak on public foreign policy, public opinion, anything. They were really kind of in prison. So to see that and to see the women coming out of their voting precinct, well, we in reality it's a precinct, but coming out of the voting booth and having their thumbprint and smiling and saying "I voted" was truly moving. And I think we're going to see that in Venezuela in a different aspect. I think it's not going to be as long as a process, hopefully, because I do think there has been an opposition kind of trying to come in. I mean, but it's going to take a process. It's not going to happen overnight, and it's going to be kind of interesting to see how the State Department is going to be involved in that, and how we're going to be able to how soon we can have those elections, and um, how that's going to have a domino effect on other places whether it could be Colombia, whether it could be Cuba. Um, but we're going to see that. And I think we're going to see, I think other countries like Iran are watching and saying, oh, this could happen relatively quickly in our area. But Iran is more of a kind of a precarious place to go to, because when you look at Iran, you're looking at how close they are in proximity to Israel, which is one of our greatest allies. And they have a
Yeah,
treaty right now with Israel, an agreement. How long will that last if we go in and try to um, do that? We do see the Iranian people and thousands coming forward and saying, "I want freedom," and it's coming at a cost. I mean, we're seeing people can't even if they leave their houses or their business, or they're risky getting shot on the street just for walking out. They're getting hung. And I think it was over, last time I saw it was like 16,500 Iranians were getting killed just for standing up against Iran. And I do think economic wise, Iran is failing as well. I mean, they're offering their citizens $7 a year, I think, or $7 a year or something extra. I can't remember. I think it was $7 a year or a month, maybe. Trying to remember what it was. It was something with $7 that they were offering for them to stop protesting, basically, to come to decide. We'll offer you money because the Iranian people are so poor because the stronghold that the Ayatollah has on them, but also economically, they're basically collapsing. And we're seeing that kind of going to be one of the next failed nation states, I think, as well. We'll see what happens in Iran, but that's kind of a more of a precarious situation, whether we go in or not. I do
yeah,
think we're going to go in. I mean, I think we kind of box ourselves and we have to do something if we want to be for human rights, if we want to stand up for freedom and democracy around the world. Whether I like it or not, U.S. is kind of the forefront of that, and we have to stand up for them. And they're asking us for help. I think it's time that we stand up to there, but it depends on Netanyahu and that. I'm sure there's conversations with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Trump and Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and I think there's definitely conversations going about what that would look like as going in, what would that happen, and also our bases in Qatar, how that would impact, because they're going to retaliate. Whether they I mean, it's limited now because we did do last time we went in, we did destroy a lot of their military defenses, but it's going to be really
right.
interesting to see how they're going to respond. I think that's the main thing is we have we want to go in there, we want to do it, but what's the retaliation going to look like? And we want to do that without the least amount of carnage and the risk of life to the American people.
We could always deflate them economically to where they can't make any nuclears or any weapons,
Mhm.
and then establish like kind of like we did. I think it was in Afghanistan where we had like
Mhm.
bombed all their oil
Mhm.
and then like bombed their nuclear and then went in and took their leaders out. So I mean that would be the most um, strategic military operation way to do it. So
Right.
deplete them and go in.
And I'm sure, the Ayatollah is watching and seeing what happened in Venezuela and and how quick and swift that action was and it, how successful it was is what I'm trying to say. It was clean. It was probably one of the most successful missions we've seen. There wasn't any risk of life to even Venezuelan people. We just went in, we attacked or went in, bombed their communications, and went in, got him. He's going to stand trial. He's going to face. I do think that more and more of the atrocities that happen in Venezuela are going to come out, and I think more and more of the American people are going to realize why. I mean, he had a warrant. It wasn't any violation of the Monroe. It was we used the Monroe Doctrine. We went in. We did it fairly. He had a warrant out for his arrest. We arrested him. We did, and we did it the best way and quickest and most successful way we could have done that.
Yep. Not only that, but he also shot down the cargo of ships that were
Mm-hmm.
entering the hemisphere that were bringing nothing but
Right.
um, yeah, drugs in
Mm-hmm.
that's killing thousands and thousands of our kids and our people in America. So
Exactly.
that
Mm-hmm.
was, I mean, best way to do it. And he entered the hemisphere, so I mean, James Monroe, Madison Monroe, or am I right?
James Monroe. Yep.
James Monroe.
Mm-hmm.
James Monroe. I mean, that was the whole point of the Monroe Doctrine. He wanted to secure the northern hemisphere in America,
Yeah.
and we did it strategically, just like that.
Right. Exactly. And it it has been on there since absolutely since James Monroe has been, and we've used it in a number of ways. Um, and I do think that we risk having, if we lose control of that hemisphere, if we lose control of that, then we cease to be able to protect ourselves, but also be able to protect other countries that depend on us. And Canada is one of those that probably depends on us more than they want to admit. But they do, if it is in their best interest to side with the U.S. on this as well, because if they can control the rest of our, it easy for us to fall. It's easy for us to we do a lot of trade, but also depending on um, they Venezuela was so dependent on other entities. The moment they get in, the moment they have control of that, and they have control of trade, they have control of that oil and resources, and that ends up having control of other countries, and therefore by trade wise it would be less secure because then more countries would depend on Venezuela. I mean, we've seen how Germany was dependent on Russian oil when Ukraine happened. Now we're seeing more and more less trade, more and more, but because of us now, because more of those countries in Europe are saying no, I don't want to have oil from Russia had to be dependent on Venezuela, and Venezuela was trading. So it was the resources, and they became close. And that being dependent on them mean dependent on control too. They had to do basically they control the purse strings. Russia did, and China has too in a lot of ways. In Venezuela, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then we also have I don't know if it's still going on, but we also have the unified, I guess they call it the unified front with China, Iran, and Taiwan,
Mm-hmm.
all forming a unilateral um, collision, I guess you want to call it,
Mm-hmm.
collision. And I mean, I know that was a huge thing with back in, I think it was maybe back in when Trump first got in office with the whole Panama Canal and Taiwan
Mm-hmm.
um, taking um, our sources, and because most of our stuff and our medicines came from Taiwan, our lithium came from Taiwan.
Mm-hmm.
Um, those chips that the microchips that we get for most of our
Mm-hmm.
like nuclear power is coming
Yep.
from Taiwan, and that's
Mm-hmm.
why it all kind of goes back to securing Greenland
Yep.
when
Mm-hmm.
we don't want to deal with a collision with the three of them, and we can secure our own power sources to
Yep.
take them on. So
Yep. It's all about us being less dependent on foreign. American first is really securing America, but also
yep.
that our best interest is not be so dependent on foreign sources, whether it's for oil, whether it's for minerals, whether it's for trade. And that's why we're seeing so much of the tariffs. We're seeing as opening up for oil. And we're seeing that the cost of gas in our country going way down is because we're moving away from being so in and on OPEC and so dependent on foreign sources of oil. And once we get control of those minerals, we're going to be um, less and less negated um, to China, less in question. I mean, so because having a free Taiwan is in our U.S. interest as well, and we can't really if we are so dependent on China and China goes in Taiwan, how is that going to impact our you talked about having it for medication. So many of our elderly depends on medication, and that does sometimes come from. We found it out during COVID that a lot of our medication and our medical equipment comes from China, and so we get those minerals, and we get build up our trade here. If we open up trade, we're not trade, but we build up our own American first factories, basically, so to speak, where we are no longer dependent on economy from, say, China, the more and more secure our country will be as well in the long run.
And that kind of hurt us way back in 2016, I think it was. Trump was in office. A lot of our vehicle manufacturers have, and even Hershey, have moved down to Mexico
Mm-hmm.
and moved across the country. And then they kind of moved back after Trump made the GDP and
Mm-hmm.
the economy strong again once he got in office. I mean, there's still some here and there that are across the country. Hershey's still in, I think, Mexico in some places,
Mm-hmm.
and but a lot of our motor companies have moved back um,
Yeah.
since then.
And I think
So,
we're going to see more and more of that because the tariffs, for one, is going to have an impact. If I was Hershey and I was facing a tariff because I was doing business overseas or Mexico, for example, and the cost of trade was higher than it was to stay here in the U.S. and have U.S. citizens have jobs here, it will bring our GDP back. Like they were saying in the news, I believe it was 5.6% GDP increase over the first or second quarter here. Um, we're going to see that dramatically. And if we can achieve that, there's no way the Democratic Party is going to regain control of Congress in November. And I do believe that's going to happen. We saw that happen in 2016, maybe not that high of a GDP increase, but we saw the American First Agenda. We saw these plants coming back. We saw U.S. manufacturing. We saw manufacturing is still. We saw, and then also Trump's going to be in my state, in Iowa, um, and I think on the 20th, it was Tuesday, next Tuesday, he's going to be here and he's going to be talking about alternative energy. And so I think that's going to be alternative energy is going to be the future to how we're going to do that, whether it's nuclear energy, wind energy. But the more we increase that energy, we're opening jobs in, for example, jobs in Iowa or in the Midwest, but also we're opening jobs. We're no longer being dependent on energy from foreign sources as well. So it's all about that American first, but it's about building our economy as well. And if he's taking steps. We're seeing how successful he's been. That's why he's at the World Economic Forum today in Switzerland. And I think we're going to see some great comes out of that. We're already seeing one huge one, which was the framework for Greenland. But we're going to see that increase here in the U.S. And I think
Right.
it's not going to be that far off from us to be able to see that. I think a lot of us, when we file our taxes this year, the big beautiful bill is impacting. I already kind of got my taxes ready, and I've seen the biggest increase in my tax refund that I've have ever seen. I can't submit obviously until late, but I've already kind
Right.
of that started. But I think American people are going to see that hardworking middle class families who are struggling paycheck to paycheck are going to see that, no tax on tips. We're going to see elderly no tax on Social Security. We're seeing these things come into fruition this year, and I think the more and more we see it, the more it's going to help the average American people. Democratic Party wants to say that it's not going to help. It will. We're seeing it in a lot of ways already, especially in tax refunds. They keep saying that it's going to be like the average tax refund is going to be like 1,500 to 2,000 up to 2,400 on average for the average person. And so I'm
Wow.
excited to see that. And that's going to go, yes, they're probably going to pay some of their Christmas bills down and stuff like that. But we're going to see that go back into the economy in some aspect. Whether it's buying a new couch with your refund, or whether it's going and using that income to go for a vacation, we're going to see that go pour back into the economy, and that's just going to make the economy stronger. And I think that's going to impact the growth in the GDP. We saw like the largest Christmas shopping, spending on Christmas shopping in decades. And it was one of the most, which that brought me hope that people were using that. Of course, online shopping contributed to a lot of that, but I I think it's going to have a large impact. If we started seeing that in Christmas, I think it's only going to go larger as we continue throughout the year.
Yeah, that would be nice because I know it was probably hard for all of us, 2020, 2021, to buy our friends and family gifts with with everything being inflated and everything like that. I went to a Trump rally back, and I think it was the one in Harrisburg he did, and heard a woman speak. She has 3 kids. She had 2 kids and was working. She was a single mom, working, working all the time. Couldn't afford groceries. Couldn't afford birthday gifts, and it was just heartbreaking. And I'm just glad that that Trump is back in office and that he's doing everything he can because he truly cares about the American people. And he's, I mean, besides Reagan, he's the only one that have been able to bring back the GDP, the economy, as fast as Reagan has.
Right.
But yeah, but he's a businessman, so that's what he does. I mean, that's how he deals. That's how he deals and sees things.
Mm-hmm. And
So
I do see a lot of parallels between President Ronald Reagan and President Trump, as far as they're more of the populist presidents that we've had in our history. I do see that the working class, you had like the Reagan Democrats that kind of came into the Republican Party after Reagan was so successful. We saw that in 2016. We saw the Trump Democrats, the blue collar working people that felt like they were working and working and working and never getting ahead. They felt like they weren't being heard. A lot of the union workers who felt like they weren't being presented and that the union wasn't supporting them in the best way. You saw the unions, other than the teachers union are still pretty popular, but unions in general we're seeing kind of lose their stronghold, their popularity. At least in the Midwest a little bit, we're seeing how their endorsements are not having such of an impact as they used to. And I do think the more and more school choice happens in our country, more and more states commit to school choice, I think the more and more the unions will kind of start to have trouble being as effective as they were. School choice here in Iowa is huge. And I think that that's going to have an impact on the future of our economy as well, because more and more of school kid generation, like seniors in college, senior in high school, I mean, they're looking at trade schools. They're looking at going in for a trade. And that's so important because that's where the jobs are right now as well. But also that's where our future is. We're seeing the baby boomers who worked in those steel mines or worked in steel, worked in the factories, worked at on in automobiles with Ford, General Motors, and we're seeing those guys retire. Guys like my dad's age, late. My dad's 75 now, but late 60s, they're retiring, and they're these kids are finally coming back and taking those jobs. And I think that's so important because if they weren't, those jobs remain vacant. But and we're going to see that kind of change as well. And I think school choice has a lot to do with that because they're not so saying that, oh, because like when I was in high school, it was you go to college, get your degree, and you get a job, and you have to get that degree. It was ingrained in you. But by the time my nephew graduated from high school, trade was so important. He went into a trade. He's a plumber and is immensely successful. I'm so amazingly proud of him. And I'm so grateful that he's doing that because he's able to provide for his wife. He stayed here in Iowa instead of going somewhere else. And my generation, I have so many friends that are spread out throughout the United States because they felt like they had to stay where they were because that's where the jobs were. But now we're seeing the jobs come back thanks to Trump, thanks to Trump, and thanks to a lot of openings from the baby boomers who are retiring as well. I'm so grateful that he's able to stay here in our area.
There's only like there's only a top 10. I think Charlie Kirk said there's only top 10. There's only top 10 people that need to really go to college, and he named them was like engineers, doctors, lawyers, surgeons, and stuff like that, nurses, and everything else you don't need to go to college for. Especially when there's like 11,000 jobs in the United States right now that you can make to up to like $8,000 a year.
Uh-huh.
I mean, and trade is one of those. You don't need to
Right.
college for a trade because American people are being scammed of their money from college universities and college institutions,
Mm-hmm.
and they come away either indoctrinated and woke, or they don't even use their degree, or don't get a job with their degree in it. Because more people are now looking for seniority and not college education.
Right. They're looking for that. Like you may have a great college degree from Yale or Harvard or one of those liberal institutions, and you go in and apply for a job, say on Wall Street, and it's like, well, you don't have any experience. Why would I hire you? And so there's more and more of a focus on experience rather than education. I think that's important. Education is important, but also having that experience, and you can't get experience without with trade, and trade is so important. A trade skill is so important. That in what's neat about some of the things that we do here in Iowa is we join with some of our community colleges here in the states, or here in the state of Iowa, and we worked with them to say you can go and kind of start your job at this location, at this plumbing or this welding or electrician or whatever you're going to school for. You can start a job at a certain business, and they will partner with that community college and pay for your 2-year trade school degree for you to be able to succeed in doing that. And they come out and they're successful, but they're working for that company, and so they're not only investing in their company, but they're investing in the future of their company because these people are going to become foremen, they're going to become take over, and as people retire, and so they're investing in the future of their company by partnering with those juniors, with those schools, and they're getting a trade, and they're by the time they're 20, they're working. And I mean, my nephew is 24, and he's able to buy a house and a wonderful home. And it's at 25, that is relatively, we're seeing that more and more people my generation 40 are living at home yet because they can't afford to buy a house. And so these trades, and they're being able to work in that trade, be able to get raises, be able to get promotions, and they're able to afford by the time they're 25 a nice home, and they're staying in the community. they're volunteering or doing work in a community, but they're also staying in the state of Iowa. So we're investing in these community schools in Iowa are investing in Iowans and having them stay and start families and build a future here in our state, which is absolutely astronomical to see.
Which will also make the economy in your state boom, because more people are working, more people are going to be paying for things rather than spending it on 4-year college education.
Right.
Um, people are going. I mean, like was it your cousin you said that's
My nephew.
25? My nephew, 25 years old, has
Mm-hmm.
a fantastic house. He was able
Uh-huh.
to afford it, and I mean, that would take years if you were, because you spent all of your money on your college education, paying for your tuition, paying for your
Hello.
books and stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that. And he was able to do it within a few years, being 25.
And debt free too, as far as without student loans. I mean, he had a 2-year degree. He's one of those that did that work with the partnership with our local college, which is Western Tech Community College. He did that. He was successful. He worked with this great company, and this company has a rich history in our community. It's been in our community for decades. Very active in our community, very good, respected company. And he partnered with them. He worked with them, and he got a job. He was making, great money from the start at 18 years old. I mean, I was just incredibly proud. I'm always incredibly proud of my niece and nephew. They're great. They're still kids to me. They're 18 and 24, but they're still kids to me, and I'm incredibly proud of them both. And what being able to stay.
Right.
Hopefully, they're staying in the community. My my niece is going to college for teaching, so she'll take that degree and teach here in the area as well. And I think she will. She loves student life, so hopefully she will.
So here in Pennsylvania, we have a um, York Road Tech is called, and it's part of the school districts, like protect kind of high school like
Hmm.
uh te- technology, and every year we had to turn down hundreds of them because they don't have enough room
Oh,
to.
wow, that's fantastic.
And luckily, my high school, my alma mater, which I'm a school board of or a school board member right now, has like the automobile, um, the auto tech um, class and like wood tech class and tech ed classes that they can go to. But it's a kind of a collaborative of because the everybody bids on the on the technological class, and so you have like different so you have like Central York, who has like a bit in it to
Uh-huh.
send their kids there. Southwest has theirs there, so it's like all collaborative going to one, and it's so filled because of everybody's wanting to go there because they don't really want to go to high school and sit there. They want to learn stuff and be
Hmm.
learn a trade instead. And but I, I talked about this to our one of our state reps, and he was like, we definitely need to like have some kind of satellite like trade schools or trade
Hmm.
satellite trade schools from some trade school,
Hmm.
so that we can actually fill those people that are being turned down every year, because it would definitely make the economy grow, because Pennsylvania is, as he likes to call it, is getting poorer, smaller, and older. Um,
Uh-huh.
and the only people that come here or come here from other states is people that have been teachers or union workers, because
Hmm.
we're one of the only states that don't charge their pensions.
Oh, okay.
So
And the thing, when you're talking about partnerships and doing like satellite classrooms, we have here in Iowa, there's a lot of high schools, including my alma mater, who have partnerships with, again, with community colleges where they're able to get college credit for certain classes. And they do those satellite, they do them through um, the school's partnership, and they are able to get school credit. And so by the time they graduate, it's not uncommon to see some of these students in high school already have an associate degree,
Yeah.
which is really cool. But also, that class credit is transferable if they do decide to go to a state college like the University of Iowa, Iowa State, UNI, or other schools. They will accept those class credits, and a lot of times they're able to graduate earlier, and that's cost effective, where they may be able to graduate without a student loan. So that to me is really, I think that's a great aspect that has started here in Iowa. um, I was taking it, this was back in 2004, where my school was offering college class credits. At the time it was more limited, there was only like one or two classes. I think there's several more now that students are able to do that, and I think that would be so beneficial if states across the country would follow that, so that these kids would be able to use those electives that they have in high school instead of taking an elective in painting or artistry. And I mean, that's great, but maybe that's the only option they have, and they would rather take a class in a trade that they want to do, take a trade class, or take a communication class, or a college level speech class, or whatever,
Yep.
to get, or any kind of class to get class credit, or to get college credit for. And I think a lot of students would say, hey, I'd rather take a college credit course, instead of taking this elective that I probably won't use. And I also think it'd be more beneficial for students to have business classes too. I think having, maybe not, I think having a required business class would be beneficial as well, because I do work in banking, and it's amazing how so many young college kids who are applying for the first credit card, so to speak, that don't know how a credit card is used, don't know how, what a checking account is, don't know how to balance a checking account. Is concerning in a lot of ways to see that, and I think having that type of a course would help them in the long run as well. So there's a lot of things I'd like to see change in education, as well.
Yeah, definitely. Um, so let's talk about the other elephant in the room, America and Israel.
Yes. Yep.
So, go ahead.
Oh,
What do
I'd
you
say
got?
Israel. I was gonna say Israel is our is so strategically important to be an ally here for the U.S., primarily because of the location in the Middle East. If we don't have our partnership with Israel in the Middle East, Israel would be. I mean, Israel already. I mean, Middle East is already, chaotic in general, but it'd be so much more chaotic if we didn't have a good partnership and with our ally Israel. And why we have to support Israel, why it's so important that we protect Israel strategically over there as well. And that's why it's such a balancing how we're going to handle with Iran and what's going to happen with Iran in the next couple of days, couple of weeks. We're going to see military action in Iran. It just depends on, and I'm sure there's, like I said earlier, I'm sure there's conversations going on with Benjamin Netanyahu talking about what that military looks like. All options are on the table. He keeps saying that all options are on the table, but he's trying to have, looking for um, the least chaotic one to do, for to speak, the least one that's going to cause the least damage. He wants the biggest. He wants the biggest outcome to secure and help the Iranian people, but also at the least risk to his ally is to our ally Israel, and also to us and to our military bases in the U.S. Like he said, he's already told them, evacuation orders have kind of been in place for the last couple of days. How that's going to happen, we're going to how is Israel, or how is Iran going to respond? Are they going to retaliate with Israel? Do they have the aspect to do that? I mean, we did a lot of, I would say, damage, so to speak. We did a lot of damage to their
Yeah.
military. We pretty much disabled them militarily. So it depends on, were they able to build up a little bit in the months that followed? What I'm sure we're been watching that and seeing that, but we got to tread lightly, because we do have a ceasefire agreement with Iran and Israel. So we really got to tread, but we also got to, if we have an opportunity to liberate the Iranian people who are desperate for liberation. I mean, you look at
Yeah.
what's sad is that I remember when I was in college, I was taking a world history class, and one of the subjects, of course, was Iran. And in there, there was this girl that was about 19, 20. She was going to college in Iran. She was, or high school. She had, she was dressed up just like I was in that class I was taking at the time. And I was seeing that, and I was seeing how that has changed since the 1970s, and how in prison the women are over there, but also how stronghold. I mean, they can't drive, they can't vote, they have to cover up to just their eyes. I mean, that's literally all you see is their eyes, and it's all black. And you see that, and you see the impression that is happening in that country, and then you see Israel, where it's westernized, it's free. Kids are going to school, they're able to be scientists, women are able to do whatever they want to do in that country. And that's why
Yeah.
Iran hates Israel and Western influences so bad, is because it's a great insult to their country and what they stand for. And if we can liberate the Iranian people, who, especially those women, are saying, my mom had this, and look what happened. Why can't I have? I'm desperate to be free. Help me. And you're seeing the calls. They're risking their lives, and that's not a joke. They're risking their lives just by walking out their house and saying, "I want to be free." And so as if we, as U.S., who's a leader in humanitarian effort, we got to see that. We got to have that. We also have to put America first and our resources first. And we're seeing a lot of things go on in the U.S. We're seeing what's going on in Minneapolis, and which is just 5.5 hours from where I live. So, and seeing that, and seeing
Yeah.
my family is from, a lot of my mom's side of the family is from that area. It's from my sister-in-law is what grew up just an hour up the road from Minneapolis. So seeing that is so devastating, because it's a beautiful state. The people are so, and outside of Minneapolis, the the majority of Minnesotans are pretty pro-Trump. The rural Minnesotans, they're not happy with Boss. They would do anything they can to stop Boss if they could, but when you have cities like St. Paul and Minneapolis that have the biggest population in the state, it's hard to get a say. And so you see that happen in Minneapolis as well. But I think that what we're seeing in Iran is kind of the call to, that's going to have a domino effect. And if we can help liberate people that want to be liberated, if we can spread freedom and democracy around the world, we have to do that. And I hope we could do that without the least amount of carnage to the American people, as well as to Israel and Iranian people.
Yeah, it's true. I know a lot of people who think, well, America first doesn't mean Israel first. I mean, and that's not true, because we need to have our allies, and we
Mm-hmm.
actually owe Israel and the Jewish people their culture, because without the Jewish people, we wouldn't have our Western civilization.
Uh-huh. Exactly.
And
Exactly.
so,
And the biggest concern is this rising here in the U.S., but across the world, is the rise of anti-Semitism and I'm seeing it more and more in our country, and it's just devastating for me to see that, because one of the things where I went to college, um, we had to go to what they call multicultural event. And so I went to a synagogue, and they are the most welcoming people that you can imagine. They are caring, they're just joyful people, and they they are so anti what people make them sound to be. Like, they're so welcoming, they're so kind, they're so proud of their culture. And if the more people be able to experience that firsthand and see that, the more people would be supportive of Israel. And I mean, I've always been supportive of Israel, but to be able to experience that, and to be a part of that. I mean, I went a couple times just because they were so kind and so welcoming. And to me, that was an eye-opening experience. I mean, you see it, you hear it, but to realize it firsthand is something that's incredible. And I think
Definitely.
if we're able to see it from Israelians' point of view, from the Jewish point of view, they've always been an oppressed people from the get-go. I mean, and this I think is incredibly moving how strong they are, considering all the adversity that they have to go through every single day. I mean,
Right.
really, I think it's amazing to see finally there's a ceasefire going on, but I really think that if we have to be supportive of them to, and not only to have a friendly face in the Middle East to be able to counteract any kind of uprising in the Middle East even more, we need Israel to help us as well.
Very much so. And besides, that's where God's word has actually said that, in 12, Genesis 12:3, that, I will bless those who will bless Israel, or Abraham's descendants. And if we are not, and the only way that our country is going to be blessed is if we protect Israel.
Right.
I mean, I'm not afraid to say it, because, I mean, a lot of people are like, "No, that's not what it means. That's not what it means." But it is what it means, because that's where Christ is going to show his tribe, and where he's going to show
Yeah,
up at, and his
exactly.
promises are there. And so we need that land in order the for his promises to come true.
Right,
And
exactly.
so, else we're all doomed, and we don't what's going to happen.
And
But
that's
yeah, I
why
mean, it's just sad seeing all the anti-Semitism coming about all these conservatives with Steve Bannon and Jack Prozac, and
Tucker Carlson,
especially who?
Tucker Carlson is one as well. Recently, that
Tucker
surprised me.
Carlson.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tucker Carlson, and what's that young guy's name? Nick Fuentes.
Yep.
Of course,
And
he's always been, and he says he's a Christian, but I don't
yeah.
think he understands the Bible. I don't think he
Right.
understands the way things are supposed to be, and
Mhm.
it's the left that's turning Nick Fuentes into the way he is, and Tucker Carlson the way he is.
Yep.
I
Exactly.
mean, because he did admit one time, Tucker said that he was Episcopalian,
Right.
and I think that is pretty much a Christian sect. But then
Yep.
turning his back on Israel like the way he did is completely non-Christian.
Right.
And Steve Bannon is Catholic. Well,
Uh-huh.
Catholics do have a history of anti-Semitism, but he's also a strong supporter of Israel at the same time.
Right.
Like, and somebody told me that he wants to start a three-state, what's it called, a three-state Israel or something like that,
Three-state solution. Yep.
with Palestine,
Mhm.
a three-state solution, which is almost starting Armageddon.
Right.
So,
Dude,
um,
I I think it's when you deal with a Christian, it's a complex issue in Israel. When you deal with the aspect of Christianity in Israel and how the Palestinians believe that they have control of a Gaza Strip or the Holy Land, Israel has the truth. So you go back to basically the Bible. You go back to Isaac and Ishmael. When you go back to
right,
Muslims and Christianity, and you go to that is always going to be in the background, in the forefront of that simple three-state solution or whatever we're trying to say. It's not going to happen because when you have generational and generations of them believing what they believe being taught back from to historical time, it's not as easy issue, it's a complex issue, and it's not as simple. Oh, if we put Palestinians in one area, we put Israel in one area, if they think that they're going to get along, it's not as easy as that, because you're always going to come back to that aspect of who has control of that land and why do they have control of the land. Why do Muslims believe they have control of that land? Why do Christians believe they have that? And the Bible proves that we have, Israel is the Christian stronghold. But you go back to that whole Isaac and Ishmael, you go back to that fighting, it's always going to come back to that, and it's not going to be something that's going to be easy to resolve. And a three-state solution is too simplistic of analogy for us for what's going on in that such a complex issue. It's too simplistic in my opinion. But
It definitely is. And I mean, the whole war of Palestine and Israel and Iran goes back to biblical ages. I mean, this goes way back, and it continues to grow even more as we get into it, because it's just never going to stop. I mean, sure, we have a ceasefire, but like you said, they might regroup, and then it might attack Israel again,
right.
and then I mean, how long is it before we start seeing a nuclear war break out with all three of our countries, and that's that.
Right. I mean, because since I've been basically I'm 40, and my all my 40 years I've always Israel and Iran was always that issue, or Israel and Palestine was always that issue. I mean, you go back to watching like the West Wing, and you saw that as a big past aspect of the West Wing was dealing with the Gaza Strip and dealing with that. And that was back in the late 1990s. And so, I mean, it's always going to come back. I mean, you may have peace for a couple of years or a decade, and then you're going to see the uprising, and you're going to see it again. Any excuse that Iran has, or Palestinian, or Hamas, any aspect to show that the American people or the Israel people are the ones that are oppressing them and the ones that are causing the issues in the Gaza Strip, or causing the issues in Iran. If they can blame the US, or if they can blame Israel, any way that they can, any westernized country, if they can blame them, the more they're going to have these people rise up with them, and the more then they have enough people to go ahead and regroup and start again. And then you're going to have the whole issue of a ceasefire, then you're going to have it again. It's always, so it's, I hope that we can have peace, but I'm distrusting of Iran. I'm distrusting of it lasting. I don't think our Hamas, I mean, no one can trust Hamas. We know that. Um, it's just
No,
gonna be, so we gotta look at it from that point and be, yes, I want to be optimistic, but what's going on in Iran right now, I think it's promising for our future, so to speak, because you have the Iranian people themselves wanting that change. We haven't had that strong of a voice in decades, I don't think. I think the last time we've seen an uprising like that was like 2011, maybe. Don't quote me on that. But this is more, I've never seen it to this level. I've never seen the Iranian people coming out as they have. And to me, that's hopeful, because if we can take control, if the Ayatollah ceases control of Iran, we're going to see the Iranian people be able to have a strong economy, be able to stand up for themselves. And then that would hopefully help bring peace back to between Iran and Israel. If they could be trade partners, if they could finally be have a mutual understanding between each other's cultures, and seeing how, oh, being westernized, having freedom, being able to go to school, being able to vote, being able to wear what I want to wear, be able to speak out, be able to have an opinion. Iranian people don't have that right now. And so if they could see that, they're going to say, oh, this is why it's so good in Israel. This is why they wanted us to not to have this. This is because
yeah,
we know this is good. This is why they don't want us to have it. They're going to understand Israel better in the long run as well. And I think that would be helpful, but that's a long road to be able to succeed that. And it starts with us trading that line and how we're going to respond and help the Iranian opposition. And I think it's only a matter of time before we do get involved. And in the long run, it's for Israel's best interest as well. For us to get involved is just how the Ayatollah, we got to make sure when we do that, we strike, and we strike uh, fiercely, and we strike without question, that we strike their communication. I mean, we were very successful in Venezuela. We were very successful the last time we went into Iran. And but we got to start the communication. We got to be able to allow communication into Iran. Right now, they're not being able to use internet. They don't have access to internet.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so Starlink went in there and tried to do that and get that. And I don't know if they were successful, but we're seeing some of the atrocities that are coming from Iranian or from the Iranian Guard. But I think the more so we're able to get in, the more so we're able to see it, the more uprising is going to happen in Iran, and they're going to be like, if this is happening to our people, we got to get involved. And I do think eventually we'll be able to, once we get in there, we're going to open that communication as well. I think it's just a matter of how we're going to do that. We got to be tread very carefully because we got to protect our interests in the Middle East, and we got to protect our interests with our Israel. And so I'm
Right.
sure there's all kinds of negotiations going on, but I'm hopeful that this uprising that's happening is going to have a lasting impact in the Middle East.
I mean, they practically, if we can liberate Iran, they'll be just as happy as Venezuela as when Trump took out Maduro.
Mm-hmm.
I was even surprised. I was shocked that they were shouting for Trump. And then you have in America Democrats calling him a dictator.
Yep,
It's like
exactly.
the guy can't win.
I know it's really, I think is so, I always say is so uneducated that they're calling him a Nazi, that they're calling, and it simplifies and the atrocities that happened during the Holocaust and what Nazis stood for. It desensitizes what happened during the Holocaust in a lot of ways. That they're saying, "Oh, he's Hitler. He's a Nazi." That the more they use that word, the less impact it has on our culture, and the less impact it has on our culture, the more opening it has for something like that to happen again. That's why you see the rising of anti-Semitism in our country is deeply concerning. I recommend anybody who visits DC to please go to the Holocaust Museum or read the Diary
Right.
of Anne Frank, to be able to understand what was really happening and what Nazism is and what Hitler was. A lot of these college kids that are protesting are these kids that are these my age too or older that are going out there. They fail to understand what he stood for, what was actually going on. So by calling Donald Trump Hitler, it's not having the impact they want it to have, but it's having a different impact. It's having a more negative impact on our culture because it's desensitizing what Hitler was. And the less education we are on this, the less we misplace that association, the less we're going to be able to remember what happened. And the biggest risk we have for the atrocities to happen is if we get our history, is for history to not learn from history and for history to repeat itself. And we have a lot of openings for that to kind of happen. And the rise of socialism in our country as well is deeply concerned because that has a lot of impact of how that can happen because they're saying, oh, this is freedom. He's repressing freedom. Socialism is all about repressing your freedom of choice. And I see that happening in New York with Madani. It's going to be really interesting to see how the people in New York respond to that. They're already kind of having buyer remorse, and he hasn't even been in office in 2 weeks. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that, because I always take a book out of Margaret Thatcher. Margaret Thatcher is one of my heroes. And she said, the trouble with socialism is eventually you run out of other people's money. And we're going to see that happen in New York. And you see that happening, and you see where there is poor, where there is low economic situation, where you have less control on the economy, where you have high taxes, where you have less economic growth, where you have high unemployment, you bring that opening to someone like a Hitler. And not to say Madani's Hitler, he's not, I'm not saying it, but you have an opening for that because that's how it happened in Germany with the reparations from World War I. It literally broke Germany's economy, and the economy was so bad. I think unemployment was, I can't remember the number, but it was skyrocketing, and that opened the door for a person like Hitler. It opened the door in Italy because of repatriations. It opened the door for someone like Mussolini. So you see that happening when you have that low economic. So if we don't listen to each other and we think, oh, Hitler's just this or Nazism this. We're not understanding the historical impact of how that happened. And we open the door for history to repeat itself. And eventually, and so we gotta be really concerned of how we use those words, because one, they're hateful words, but two, they're desensitizing them in a lot of ways as well, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. Yeah, and New York, from what I was told, was also uh, housing free people in
Mm-hmm.
their schools and in their buildings at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
throughout 2021 to like still now,
Yep.
um, and allowing, and I think it was allowing free phones as well and
Mm-hmm.
money for anybody to come into the country, and it was ridiculous. And I think that's where a lot of these elections are being taken from us,
Mm-hmm.
is illegals being
Right.
able to vote and being free housed here. Um, I think, I think if you can't pay taxes, you shouldn't be living here. For first of all, you need to have like a sheriff come to all of your apartments and kick you out for not being able to pay your rent or something.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Absolutely.
so
And
yeah,
and
and
yeah,
that's what
and
happened in New York with Adami,
yep,
I think.
exactly. Yep, and that I think that opened the door in like Seattle, and you see that happening in LA and all these where you have these sanctuary cities, and that's also a foreign policy aspect too, because the more you have these, I mean, look, you're seeing that incursion of Chinese nationalists coming into our country because they're being born here. And there was this, I saw the news. There was this guy that had like Vera Surrogacy had fathered like 100 Chinese nationalists, and they come over in this country, and that is a national security issue. And and then you also have where they're taking over their countries because they're allowing sanctuary states and sanctuary cities are allowing these, giving voting rights to these non-citizens, and that's overcoming the voice of overcoming the voice of the citizens. And I think that's
Yeah.
why we need to have voter ID law. But on the flip side of that, that's why China's like, or that's why California's like, oh, let's give them my ID. Because even if they have voter ID, they could go in and show their ID, even though they're a non-citizen, because non-citizens can have an ID and a driver's license in California. And apparently they can also have a CDL and be able to cross and
Yeah.
cause carnage that way as well. So we're seeing the impact of um, these sanctuary cities. We're seeing the impact of what they're having in our country, and so we need to go after that as well. So it's kind of all full circle. The American First agenda has all aspects, whether it's foreign policy or domestically, it all ties together. When you put American first, you're putting our interests first, and you're putting the American people first, protecting them, protecting their sovereignty, protecting their right to vote, protecting everything that we could risk when having these kind of situations that are happening not only here in the U.S. but around the world.
Yeah. So to wrap things up,
Uh-huh.
um, where can people find you?
So yes, so they can find me on all social media. It's the Conservative and Chic podcast. And you can connect with me on social media by going to www.conservativeandchic.com and be able to access my social media networks there, be able to um, listen to the guests that I've had on my show, and you can get daily. I put some all kinds of things that are going on. I'm excited to have some really good guests coming up. So I just kind of keep an eye out, look for that, and hope you can follow me. You see the logo back here. That is what my logo looks like. Follow me, and I'd love to connect with you. If you have questions about what's going on, my opinions on certain things, I'd be happy to address all those as well. So thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I know we kind of talked longer than we thought, but thank you so
Oh, no,
much.
you're
And
good.
um,
You're welcome.
uh, I will definitely share your the lines and information on my social medias as well. Really like your show
All
and
right.
what you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Yep. Have a good one.
You too. Bye.
Bye bye.